You won't believe what just happened on live TV. A Reform MP just took a mainstream media reporter to task, shutting down every loaded question with facts and confidence. Watch as this heated exchange unfolds, exposing the bias right in front of millions.
Believe in man-made climate change?
Look, climate change is real, has gone on for millions of years, always will. The arrogant naivety of people who think that you can stop the power of the sun, stop the power of volcanoes.
But about man-made climate change.
Hear me out. Yeah. But there's no evidence that man-made CO2 is going to change climate change. Given that it's gone on for millions of years, it will go on for millions of years.
You're saying there's no evidence that man-made climate change is changing CO2, is that what you're saying?
So how did climate change happen before man-made CO2?
What is it that the vast majority of experts who believe that human activity has impacted climate change since the Industrial Revolution, what is it that you know that they don't?
I've read the International Governmental Panel on Climate Change's report, AR6 I think it's called, their sixth report, and it says if you get to net zero tomorrow, it'll make no difference to sea level rise for between 200 years and 1,000 years. In other words, they've not got a clue and it won't make any difference. We're being lied to, we're being misinformed, and we've got the courage to say to people, we've got to stop this nonsense. We all care about the environment, we all care about the countryside, that's why I don't want pylons blighting our countryside, that's why I don't want solar panels on it. But to suggest that a bit less CO2 is going to stop the power of the sun, stop the power of volcanoes, is arrant nonsense.
But that same panel that you were talking about,
when asked for his thoughts on climate change, Richard Tice didn't hesitate to share his perspective. With his usual confidence, he delivered a detailed response offering his take on the issue and challenging mainstream narratives. His remarks sparked debate as he presented his views with conviction and a refusal to back down.
Do you believe in man-made climate change?
Look, climate change is real, has gone on for millions of years, always will. The arrogant naivety of people who think that you can stop the power of the sun, stop the power of volcanoes.
But about man-made climate change.
Hear me out. Yeah. But there's no evidence that man-made CO2 is going to change climate change. Given that it's gone on for millions of years, it will go on for millions of years.
You're saying there's no evidence that man-made climate change is changing CO2, is that what you're saying?
So how did climate change happen before man-made CO2?
What is it that the vast majority of experts who believe that human activity has impacted climate change since the Industrial Revolution, what is it that you know that they don't?
I've read the International Governmental Panel on Climate Change's report, and it says if you get to net zero tomorrow, it'll make no difference to sea level rise for between 200 years and 1,000 years. In other words, they've not got a clue and it won't make any difference. We're being lied to, we're being misinformed, and we've got the courage to say to people, we've got to stop this nonsense. We all care about the environment, we all care about the countryside, that's why I don't want pylons blighting our countryside, that's why I don't want solar panels on it.
But that same panel that you were talking about, the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, said human activities are the main cause of climate change. Do you agree with that? That's a yes or no question.
No, that's absolute garbage, and I've just proven it because the climate change for millions of years before man-made CO2, they are lying to people, and the Norwegian government's own equivalent of our ONS has recently produced a report along the lines of what I'm saying there's no evidence based on the real data that proves that suggestion.
The overwhelming scientific community.
There's masses of debate
say that the rate of
I can give you a list of
climate change since the Industrial Revolution has been vastly exacerbated by human activity. Do you not agree with that?
No, I don't. I can give you a list of 1,000 experts and scientists and professors, including...
That is a real minority. Why are they right and not the majority?
It's not a minority. There are loads and loads of scientists. There are loads of scientists who are terrified to speak because they won't get any research funding if they tell it as it is. There's so much money in the vested interests who are trying to push this agenda on us. It's got to stop. Only Reform UK is going to stop it. And do you know what? We're leading in the polls. Maybe the British people are starting to realise we're talking the truth. They know they're being lied to.
So NASA, when they say human activities are the primary cause of global warming and climate change, the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, human activities are the main cause of climate change. They've got it wrong.
So President Trump has just been elected with a massive majority to lead the US, and he adopts our position. Maybe actually the American people, when they've been given a vote, they've realised that people like NASA, part of the establishment, they're wrong, and actually President Trump and we are correct.
So do you think we should trust experts generally?
I think there are experts and there's vested interests, and then there's people who tell the truth. The problem here is that money is driving the vested interests who are making fortunes out of the renewable industry, and it's decent ordinary people who are being ripped off paying higher bills, higher cost of living, and we're telling it as it is. Scrap net zero, you'll have lower bills and a lower cost of living.
Do you think you're in line with the public, though? Because the most recent...
Clearly, we're going up in the polls. We're literally leading in the polls.
On this particular issue, because a majority of the public, according to the most recent YouGov poll, back net zero.
If you ask the same people, do you believe... Yes, we believe in the countryside and looking after the environment, but if you ask those people, if net zero is going to give you higher bills, higher cost of living, do you want to pay an extra £400 or £500 before tax every year because of net zero? When we only represent 1% of CO2 emissions in the world, the answer very quickly changes. If you ask the right question, you get the right answer.
Despite the reporter's attempts to challenge his response, going as far as asking, "Where did you learn this from?" Tice remained unfazed. He fired back with quick, sharp answers, reinforcing his stance with confidence and dropping what he saw as undeniable wisdom throughout the exchange.
You know, like all of us are concerned about climate change, but the way that the government's proposals they perpetuate and they promote will simply disproportionately impoverish the poorest in our society the most.
Okay, now you say that, and I understand that, but is it fair to even is it fair to be in this day and age a climate skeptic? So, for example, there are some people who will say this stuff is put together by people who are driven by different motives, that the climate change is being driven by changes to magnetic poles, all that sort of stuff. Do you think that that is in the realms of conspiracy theory and the climate is changing and we need to do something? Or do you take the view that we are being pushed into making decisions and taking decisions that are perhaps driven by a different agenda?
Look, it's hard to know some of these, what drives certain people. But the mainstream clear data shows that yes, there is warming taking place. And, I think that most of us understand that. And there are things that we can do to reduce our emissions. I, for example, play my part. Both the Deputy Leader and Leader of Reform UK, we've both got electric cars. So, I think there are things we can do. But what we shouldn't do, James, as we look to reduce emissions over the next 20 to 30 years, is force the cost unnecessarily on the lowest paid in society, the least well off, with plans that are simply not the right way to go. And at the moment, what troubles me is there's no discussion about alternatives.
Let me ask you just finally, Richard, before we go to the news. We've put this Twitter poll up, which says the world will face catastrophic climate change unless immediate action is taken, according to Alex Sharma, the UK minister in charge of climate talks to be held in November. Are you worried about climate change? And the simple answer is yes or no. Richard Tice, what is your answer?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, and I think we can do. We are doing. Let's celebrate our success, James. The UK has led the way. We've reduced our emissions by 50% in the last 30 years. Let's celebrate our success. Let's continue to lead the way with technology. But let's not be daft and stupid about forcing the cost unnecessarily from the wrong schemes like daft proposals to ban all our boilers on the least well off and the poorest in society. That's no way to make a difference.
In other news, new government data reveals that over 9% of NHS referral letters required translation into foreign languages last year, a significant increase from 3.78% in 2021. The figures, obtained through government transparency rules, highlight a growing demand for translation services within the NHS over the past 5 years. Urdu topped the list as the most requested language for translation, accounting for 15% of all translated referral letters. Bengali followed as the second most common, with Polish ranking third.
Rupert, final question. Would a reform government ask the British people to pay for medical care in terms of improving the NHS?
Well, personally, I think we should be allowed to opt out of the NHS and have some form of, scheme where we buy our own healthcare and take ourselves out of the NHS. There's a lot of ways in which you can actually solve the NHS. As we know, Jeremy, central planning never has and never will work. And what the NHS now is a centrally planned beast. It's like an animal on the back of productive Britain, and it's killing us. So somebody's got to grasp the nettle and sort it out. So personally, I think My view of life is not always the same as others. I want to empower people to take control of their own lives. I don't want a dependency culture, which effectively is what Gordon Brown tried to create, hoping that they'd always vote Labour.
Reform UK MP Rupert Lowe weighed in on the findings, stating, "This is the best estimate we've managed to extract from the government on the number of people in the country who cannot speak English. These figures only account for those without functional English skills and do not include foreign nationals who may have basic communication abilities."
What Kemi and the Conservatives are saying is that if someone comes to this country to work and then they don't work, they don't make a contribution, then they shouldn't have a path to citizenship or to remaining here permanently. And in fact, if someone comes here saying they're going to work with a work visa and doesn't, then in fact they should have their visa revoked and should be required to leave, because British citizenship and the right to stay in Britain permanently is a privilege, and we want people who come here to actually be working and making a contribution. So that is the new policy that's being announced today, in combination with what we said before, which is we'll introduce a legally binding hard cap on the number of visas given out at a much, much lower level than is currently the case, in order to get immigration right down and to make sure we focus on much smaller numbers of people with high levels of skills. And if people come here and don't work when they're supposed to, then they should leave. I can tell you now, it'll be a lot lower than recent levels of immigration, and it will also be a lot lower than the recent forecasts we've seen from the OBR and the ONS. Very, very dramatically lower, legally binding, by capping the number of visas given out, because we do need to get these numbers right down and make sure people that come here actually make a contribution. When people come here and then just claim benefits or become dependent on social housing, that is not fair to the British taxpayer, who have to fund all that. So look, small numbers of people coming here to work in high-skilled jobs, that's fine. Mass low-skilled immigration, or people coming here and not working, or coming here and claiming benefits or becoming reliant on social housing, that is not.
Meanwhile, Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp strongly criticised NHS translation services, calling them a misuse of public funds. The overstretched NHS should not be spending money translating letters for people who come to the UK without bothering to learn English. People moving to Britain should learn English, rather than rely on taxpayer-funded translations. It's time to end mass immigration. These figures show that many immigrants are not integrating. Numbers must be dramatically cut, and we must insist on proper integration. Active leader Kemi Badenoch has announced plans to tighten residency requirements for migrants. Under her proposal, migrants must prove they have worked for at least 10 years without claiming benefits or relying on social housing before qualifying for indefinite leave to remain. Meanwhile, Reform UK has pledged a one-in, one-out migration policy, effectively aiming to freeze net migration. Recent polling shows the party gaining ground, now surpassing the Conservatives in voter support.
Do you get special privileges that nobody else does?
No, and we'll have to see if they know something about the drugs, and if he lied, they'll have to take appropriate action.
Appropriate action?
Yeah.
Which might mean not staying in
I
America.
don't know. You'll have to tell me. You just have to tell me. You would have thought they would have known this a long time ago.
You would.
But I thought they were very disrespectful to the family, to the royal family. I'm a big fan of the concept of the royal family and the royal family. Now, I'm a little prejudiced because I thought the Queen was incredible. I mean, think of it, all those years, 75 years, she's almost never made a mistake.
Right.
In the US, Donald Trump has vowed to support legal action against Prince Harry if it's proven that the Duke of Sussex misrepresented his past drug use on his US visa application. While Trump previously stated he wouldn't deport Harry, sources now claim he insists on full transparency and is prepared to back legal proceedings if necessary. A source explained, President Trump has made it very clear that if Harry is found to have been dishonest on his visa application, he could face prosecution. If he had answered the drug question truthfully, it would have triggered a visa waiver process, requiring an interview and approval. If that happened, the public has a right to know. In a related development, Judge Carl Nichols has ordered the release of details regarding a previously undisclosed meeting between himself and Department of Homeland Security lawyers. The decision marks a significant shift from his initial ruling, which kept all documents private. A legal expert weighed in on the matter, saying, "It is highly unusual, if not unprecedented, for a judge to hold a secret meeting with government lawyers without informing the opposing legal team." Under US law, anyone found guilty of providing false information on a visa application could face up to 5 years in prison, a fine, or deportation. What are your thoughts on today's topics? Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel for more British content.